First of all, let's talk a little bit about motivation. As of right now, it's very difficult to estimate how many users there actually are in the crypto asset domain. However, there's a study from 2018, which is the global crypto asset benchmarking study, that suggests that there exist approximately, or at least 35 million uniquely ID identified users. Now, when it comes to the crypto assets in general, there are currently over 5,000 different crypto assets, and Bitcoin is only one of them. And when it comes to the overall market capitalization, we are currently, I think, approximately around 300 billion US dollars, and Bitcoin, while responsible for over 60 or 65%, I believe, the others are still over 100 billion US dollars worth. So that means that crypto asset users are constantly exposed and are constantly dealing with these other crypto assets, and we cannot just ignore them. However, usable security research is mostly focused, is very Bitcoin centric. So we wanted to address that and understand the usage behavior when it comes to handling crypto assets beyond Bitcoin. So our research objectives are generally can be grouped in 5 different groups. So first of all, we wanted to understand the usage behavior. We wanted to see how users handle crypto assets, why they do so, and what challenges they have when they do so. Also, when it comes to the risk perception, we wanted to see what risks are perceived by both users and non-users. We wanted to also investigate the reasons for non-involvement for non-users. Because in research right now, it is mostly suggested that non-users do not use crypto assets because they don't understand them. So we wanted to provide an in-depth view and look why exactly that is. And also, we had part of the study focused on trust, as we wanted to understand how trust is being built amongst those faceless and decentralized actors in the domain. In this talk, however, I will be focusing on everything but trust. So to investigate that, we use qualitative methods. So a little bit of a rundown. We wanted to discover and understand the perceptions, motivations, and behaviors of crypto asset users and non-users. When it comes to the recruitment and the sample, we wanted to recruit a diverse sample, and it did not necessarily have to be representative. Also, we wanted to provide an in-depth view more than a broad overview about the behaviors. So generally speaking, we wanted to provide a rich, contextualized understanding of human behavior in the crypto asset domain. So how did we do that? First of all, when it comes to the data collection, we conducted semi-structured interviews with both users and informed non-users. So in the semi-structured interviews, we had an interview guide, but for example, in comparison to structured interviews, we focused on the issues that arose during the interactions with the respective participants. So we did not have a structured, very strict script, but we could go off the script if some interesting information came along. Informed non-users, here we tried to recruit participants with different or varying understanding of crypto assets. So some non-users understood and heard about Bitcoin and other crypto assets in the news, for example, CryptoKitties, but did not really understand the underlying technology, whereas others actively tried to purchase them on exchanges but failed in doing so. When it comes to the data analysis, we transcribed all interviews and used the grounded theory approach to investigate or create a theory or come up with a theory that explains the usage behavior or the usage intentions. So we wanted to create a theory or construct a theory based on the data. We did that in a 3-step iterative coding approach with 3 researchers. So in the beginning, we had the open coding, where our goal was to go through the raw data and look into the sentences, the paragraphs, and actually contextualize and describe the information that we saw. In the next stage, the axial coding, we wanted to create connections between those codes. And then in the selective coding, our goal was to actually create the context and investigate which drivers exist in the data set. So basically, which drivers are the most important when it comes to the theory or the grounded theory. So we had 148 codes and 6 categories. This is an overview of the grounded theory approach that we had, or grounded theory exercise that we had. These are the demographics. We tried to recruit participants from varying backgrounds, degrees, occupation, and also, as far as possible, diversity in gender. We stopped recruiting when it became clear that we had reached code saturation or coding saturation. The y-axis is the number of different codes, where the x-axis are the number, or is the number of interviews. In the last 3 interviews, we did not gather any new information, so the overall number of codes was 148. So let's come to the findings overview. First of all, the use cases of crypto assets. We identified 3 different use cases that were reported by our crypto asset users. First of all, investment, which is not new, but also non-monetary cases and medium of exchange that participants actively use their crypto assets for. For example, one participant said that he bought video games via Steam as long as it was possible. However, does not do that anymore because his usage behavior actually changed as the price of Bitcoin rose. Another participant explained that he used Bitcoin and other crypto assets to pay for yoga classes and actually eat sausages in a restaurant because his body accepted Bitcoin as a payment method. Also, non-monetary cases were also prevalent amongst our participants. Some participants referred to CryptoKitties when we asked them, and others explained that, for example, in the case of participant 1, he was trying to make a bet on a basketball game because he was a fan, but could not do so because of usability issues that he encountered in the platform or on the platform. When it comes to the losses, we identified 3 main reasons that losses occurred. So basically, the main issue were self-errors. These self-errors can be different. For example, some participants deleted the private key. Others just incorrectly transferred their coins to a different address. This participant explained that he bought Bitcoin at an ATM and then could not find his private key and basically lost the private key. Another participant said that he experienced exchange shutdowns. So in this case, he lost over 100 Litecoin, and this was also confirmed by other participants that experienced something similar. When it comes to the risks, we have a variety of different risks, and I'm going to only cover a couple of them. So here we have risks that are very commonly known, such as fraudulent ICOs, the volatility, or the social stigma that might come with the usage of crypto assets. However, some risks are novel to the best of our knowledge. For example, one participant explained that there might be a financial imbalance when it comes to using crypto assets. For example, if you own 1 to 10 Bitcoin now, you might be one of the wealthiest people in 20 years potentially. Further, the access after death was brought up by one participant. So what happens to your crypto assets once you die? How will you transfer these to your inheritors? Also, crypto assets were compared to traditional banking systems. One participant explained that he believed that somebody could literally take a gun against your head and say, give me your private key. You could, in the traditional system, you could not just go to a bank with a gun in your head and just get or transfer all your money to the robber in this case. For non-users, they were also aware of the security risks that come with the usage of crypto assets. However, they had their reasons against using them. For example, non-users identified the onboarding overhead and said that it was just very difficult to use the exchanges because they had to wait multiple weeks to actually get approved in order to be able to buy crypto assets. Usability issues were also reported by some participants that actually tried to use the crypto asset wallets. One participant said, in the case of Ethereum, that I also have to download all the other wallet code software and I just gave up because it's kind of too hard. For other non-users, it appears that generally crypto asset transactions appear to be abnormal. One participant explained that it's all virtual, there's nothing real, you don't see anything. How do you know how much you have? I know it's on the screen. For this participant, it's particularly interesting because she's an assistant manager at Money Exchange, so it is not surprising that purely virtual transactions are abnormal. Now, when it comes to the risk management techniques for users, we identified a couple of themes that kind of stretch all over the users. For example, some participants mentioned that they just use multiple wallets and explain that long-term holdings like Bitcoin I store offline, small investments I'm not necessarily concerned about, such as let's say, tokens or utility tokens I just store online on exchanges. Another participant said, as he understood the value of the private key, he said that I have a software wallet and I hide my files on something else and then I encrypt. However, this can only be done if the respective user actually understands the value of the private key. As one participant, for example, explained that, I haven't figured out how they have the private key on the phone, wallet, I still don't understand the private and public key. These might lead to a false sense of security, particularly because also some participants explained that they firmly believe that they actually have access to their private keys on exchanges such as Coinbase. And now let's jump to the results and the kind of conclusion. So what we encountered that coin management tools have UX issues that influence both users and non-users. For users, these UX issues can lead to losses, to monetary losses, whereas non-users might just be not inclined to use the technology at all because they were overwhelmed by the onboarding process and also by the tools. And as Allison suggested on Monday, so possibly we should not blame the users for the losses, but more the wallet developers, because even if participants that are very well versed and have been using the technology for 7 or 8 years have issues and sometimes address their transactions incorrectly, how can the technology be used by new users and newcomers? So when it comes to the reasons against using crypto assets, it goes beyond the lack of understanding. So lack of knowledge was seen as a risk by participants, by non-user participants. However, crypto assets were also perceived as abnormal. And also the lack of regulation was worrisome for many. So when we can think about 3 constructs that appear to have a negative influence on the user's intention, or in this case, the intention to avoid crypto assets. Also, the perceived risks, although they were mentioned by both users and non-users, they had also negative influence on the intention to use crypto assets. So, however, lack of regulations were also a concern for users. For users, they mentioned that it is very hard for them to distinguish between questionable coins that were just created in bad faith and good coins or good, valid crypto assets that were created in good faith. And users also accepted the risk when it comes to crypto assets in order to be able to use them. And excuse the pejorative term, but especially with a lot of these real shit coins, they're on really questionable exchanges, so you kind of have to play in there in the mud and get dirty. And now, it appears that factors that influence security, that security behavior is more nuanced. So it appears that factors such as the use case of the respective crypto asset influences the security behavior. So depending on what kind of asset it is, whether it is a utility token or a cryptocurrency, or whether this asset is being just used to trade, depends which interaction partners the respective user actually interacts with. So also the amount invested appears to be an influence on the storage methods and the risk perception, the risk severity for users. The type of asset, as I mentioned, and also the interaction partners. So the recommendation. When it comes to the self-efficacy, we believe that by optimizing the onboarding process and the KYC practices, if one can optimize these, potentially new customers would be more inclined to be actually able to use the technology. Also, personalization of wallets can help understanding users with different knowledge base how to actually get involved in the domain. Further, sandboxes where non-users or newcomers could actually familiarize themselves first before using the actual technology might also help the self-efficacy. So for the situational normality, the wallet software should be modeled after systems that non-users are familiar with, such as, for example, online banking or PayPal, and less use of technical jargon, because as non-users reported, they did just not understand what gas prices are or other transaction settings. And lastly, for the structural assurances, it appears that regulatory involvement is still needed to be actually, and this regulatory involvement can help both users and non-users. So for the future work, we're currently doing a confirmatory study and also are developing usability guidelines and heuristics to help alleviating some of the identified issues for coin management tools. And when it comes to the conclusion, so research should go beyond Bitcoin to truly understand the security behavior of users. further, UX is a major concern for both existing and potential users, and enhancing the UX can lead to both adoption and to less errors on the user side. And lastly, we have the regulatory involvement that needs to happen for both users and non-users to feel more safe. So before I conclude, since we're currently recruiting for the survey, so if you're interested in participating or want to spread the survey, either send me an email or come to me and grab my card. And also I created a Twitter account recently. So it's not a sneaky method to get followers, but if you're interested in the research, give me a follow and I'll probably spread the survey very soon. So yeah, thank you.
While I'm walking over to Ingolf, I have one question. So it seems like in your study you observed that users as well as non-users don't have a particularly favorable view about UX and usability in the system, which is a bit unusual to many other systems. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. I believe personally that users explicitly said that the horrible UX, they're just used to it at this point, but they also said that this comes with experience. So they do not necessarily understand what they're doing, but they're just familiar with it. They know what to click, what to enter, and they also express their displeasure when it comes to actually pushing this towards mass adoption, because they also explain that they, for example, could not give the wallet software to their parents, for example, and tell them, okay, can you please send me a transaction, because they will most likely not be able to do so. So this is also one thing that we're investigating. So probably that the familiarity with the tools are more important than the actual technical understanding.
Thank you, interesting research. To what extent could your users actually verbalize the difference between the different cryptocurrencies? Or actually, firstly of all, what kind of set of different cryptocurrencies did the user talk about, and how could they describe the differences?
Interestingly, initially this research was focused on cryptocurrencies, but after we started interviewing participants, they actually had trouble distinguishing between what is a cryptocurrency, what is a token, what am I actually using these for. So, and the thing is, for cryptocurrencies, some participants were still trying to use them as a currency, whereas tokens were mostly used as, well, as an investment. And so basically, only a small number of participants actually understood the difference between tokens and cryptocurrencies. Yeah.
My question is following along from that. Did you have any positive stories where someone went and bought a utility token and got utility from it? Or they went to get CryptoKitties and they just thought, wow, I'm so glad I did this.
Actually, because CryptoKitties is kind of a big thing in Vancouver, because Dapper Labs is based in Vancouver. So many people, also particularly non-users, said, for example, I heard about CryptoKitties because CryptoKitties is cute. So she kind of preferred the non-technical manner or non-technical presentation for the CryptoKitties. But however, participants actually said that when they look at a cryptocurrency, or in this case a crypto asset, they take the use cases into account. So for example, if this respective crypto asset is good for the planet, let's say, and does not necessarily use like proof of work or whatever, they said that they would prefer such a crypto asset than, for example, Bitcoin or others. And they also said that, for example, they wanted to have a utility use. They tried to actually make transactions and place bets, but they were not able to do so because the usability is just not there yet. So yeah.
Did the users compare at all with apps and platforms provided by traditional banks, and was there a comparison to the benefits of using the one or the other as far as the UX goes?
As far as the UX goes, I do not think that they explicitly mentioned that. The only comparison came with the decentralization aspect. So that their main motivation was, okay, I want to use that because there is no bank. I want to be my own bank. But a direct UX comparison was only prevalent for non-users, where they said, I'm familiar with that, but this seems abnormal, so I do not know what to think about it.
Hi, do you have any plans to look at how users perceive the risk of exchanges? You know, the actual platform that they do the trading on. So you have custodial exchanges like Coinbase, where you fully trust them, and And now that what we're witnessing is the rise of DEXs, so Kyberswap today hit their milestone of $10 million in 24 hours, where you don't actually have to trust anyone. You know, I have self-custody, I run it through a program, and it does the trade for me. Have you considered looking at that aspect at all and how users perceive that risk?
Sure, great question, because this is exactly a working paper right now that is based on the same data set where we look into the trust aspect. So basically what factors play a role when it comes to, well, trusting these faceless and possibly decentralized actors in the domain. So what factors users actually see and how they interpret these cues that are provided by them. And it appears, so like not to take like too much away from the paper that is currently in progress, but most of the information that the users have at their disposal is unreliable. So when it comes to exchanges, it is very hard for them to distinguish, okay, is this a good one or is this a bad one? So it's kind of, they're mostly flipping a coin and hope for the best.
Okay, so they don't look at custodianship at all?
Not yet, no.
So there are a lot of questions here. I'm not shutting this down yet, except there's a real deep eagerness to get coffee right away.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I was just wondering, because you have conducted this study with the North American users, I was just thinking, do you think that you will have the same results if you conduct this kind of interviews with European people or South American users? I'm just asking the question because I know in some areas, security and privacy, for example, the cultural aspect have an impact on the results. So I'm just wondering if you think regarding cryptocurrencies, you would have like different results.
Thank you. So the survey that we're currently conducting is a collaboration between UBC, so our research group, and the University of Innsbruck. So we will be recruiting in both Europe and North America. And then one of the variables, or like the dependency that we want to investigate, is whether the location will actually have an influence. We would have to wait to see whether the two cultures, like European and North American, are that much different, but we'll still kind of like hopefully see what kind of influence cultural changes might have.
You should try to go for Korea. So a lot of the trading happens in Korea now, because they have really good tax implications.
Yeah, thank you. Might look into that as well.
Do you find that there's has anyone indicated that they feel like there's hostility to them joining this community? Like, for example, I was reading about like voting systems and a lot of these crypto assets, and some people are like, oh, we should make it easier for people to participate because participation in most of these systems is very low. And other people are like, no, let's keep it hard so the idiots can't participate. So yeah, like there's almost like this like superiority, like yeah, it's hard, and like we're the only ones who figured it out. Do you find any evidence of like that being a barrier to adoption?
From our sample, the users were actually very open, and they said that they are scared for the non-users when it comes to using crypto assets because they knew that it's hard to use. And they said that things need to happen in order for them to be able to use that. However, for the non-users, they said that there's a social stigma when it comes to using crypto assets, and they said that for example, one participant said that if he would be using crypto assets, other people might think that he's just buying drugs or is like a risk taker. So while it is generally not generalizable what we have right now, but from the users, they appear to be very open when it comes to newcomers because they are also interested in kind of adoption, let's just say, or at least like the participants that we had.
All right, so let's take the last couple of questions into the coffee break. We are already 15 minutes over time, and as a German, I feel tremendously guilty. So for the next session, please go to Jeff. Jeff is there, right? And I think at the beginning of the next session, Jean wants to do a brief announcement of some kind. But now the coffee break starts, so we have 15 minutes until the beginning of the next session. And let's thank the speaker one more time. That was